Take those color copies.
If you two could share.
Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council, Monday, June 10th. Tonight, Council is meeting in several committee meetings, Finance and Personnel Committee, Planning and Development, and our Transportation Committee will be have issues to discuss. Last week, we accepted a resignation from Councilmember Elahu Ghazni, and I have asked Councilmember Michelle Pappy to move up into his space as chair of the Transportation Committee and take his place on the Planning and Development Committee. When the new council person, his replacement, comes on board, we will ask them to take take Michelle's position on the Transportation Committee. So, with no dire comments, we'll proceed with our first committee meeting, which is the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 5 items to discuss tonight. The first one being what's titled urban paving. And this is for the city's portion of a project to which we had previously appropriated $36,050. And the local match for our portion of this has increased to $47,528. So we need to request an additional $11,478 for this project. And I believe this is for the paving that ODOT
Is doing 50 to the west.
Correct. And so portions, it's a cost savings in that we're coordinating it with Ohio Department of Transportation, and we're paying for our portion of the share that's within the city limits. The next one is the northwest, what we've called the Northwest Bikeway, and we have described where this is, but just a little bit of a reminder, this is in the area out beyond the railroad bridge that was renovated a year or so ago in West State Street Park. And the discussion has been about grant funds that we have available, approximately $181,000 of which can be used for purchase of some property that would allow us to extend this. So we're referring to it as the Northwest Athens Bikeway Spur. Phase 2 is the project assigned by the Public Works Office. As I understand it, and we probably have some additional information from the Service Safety Director, we are still in negotiations about finalizing the property. And I know that we'll have several steps to this process, so the negotiations probably being the first thing. We do have the grant funds, and we'd need to certify those resources for the grants available. That the grant itself will work on a reimburse basis, so we would need to pay the cash first, and then be reimbursed. The money, the cash, the accounts from which we'd pay that would be the Capital Improvements Account 580 for the property itself, and then account 220, the street funds, for the actual construction of the extension. And Service Director Mosley, do you have some additional information?
Well, I would share with you that we are indeed under negotiations with the property owner representative. There are actually, I believe, 8 family members involved in that, but he's taken the lead on that. We've had the property surveyed and appraisal, but we're working towards, a closure. I also want to share with Council that we need to close on this in order to meet the grant deadlines by the end of August. So when this comes up, as soon as it does, I would request, if we could, the suspension and emergency so that we can proceed with acquiring that land and then proceeding with building that bike path spur. So.
Which would be great.
Having surveyed the land, do you remember approximately how many acres are there?
A little over 11, I do believe.
Yeah.
11.209 net acres.
Close enough. Okay. Thank you.
So of the different accounts that we mentioned, the 580, the capital improvements account, we've already appropriated, as I understand, $146,500. So we would need to authorize that. And then out of the 220 street accounts, we'd need to authorize and appropriate $97,500. So, okay.
I believe so. Yes.
Those were the backwards. You're probably right. Those are the two amounts
Yeah.
coming out of each fund.
Okay, I might have transferred.
One already has money appropriated, and the other one needs it appropriated.
Appropriation.
Both of them, the money's available.
Okay.
Paula, you're thinking that it's going to move fairly quickly at this point, or it's just...
I do, simply because we're under the deadline from the state in order to acquire the land. And they actually, we just need to get this under
We won't be
contract.
meeting in August, so that's what I was thinking we need to...
Which is why you've asked for suspension when it does come up. But we have June and all of July to get that done.
So, yes, Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I was just going to, it's been addressed both with the Public Works Department and with Rich Campitelli, Director of Arts, Parks, and Recreation. I recall there being discussion about this at those meetings. And it seems to be that there is support from both those departments.
And certainly, linking up yet another area of the city so people can use the bicycle path for transportation just adds to the green space, too. And we received a comment from a citizen this past week where somebody at the other end of the bicycle path had unloaded their bikes and they were from out of state. And so, seeing that kind of tourism coming to the city is an additional benefit, too. So. Okay. Next item has to do with the fair housing contract, and this allows for reimbursement of authorized expenditures. And I'm assuming these are our administrative expenditures that we encounter, and of which will be allowed $4,200. So we're needing to schedule the payment for reimbursement for us for that fair housing contract. So,
Okay.
and as I understand, Auditor Hecht, you'll be assigning account lines and asking for, and so we'll move forward and have that as part of our appropriation ordinance next Monday then.
Sure.
We have an update. The next agenda item has to do with the University Estates assessment. And the Equalization Board met on Wednesday, and they voted to let stand with no change the 4 objections received. So we're ready to move forward with the other ordinances. Our Clerk of Council, Debbie Walker, has suggested this, and it makes great sense. We'll coordinate all of those ordinances about the same time and group them together so they could begin next week. I don't believe there are any other updates on that about the University Estates at this point, but we'll have.
We are advertising.
Great, okay, good. And that's another one of those situations where we're trying to coordinate it well so we can move with all due speed to get the work completed and have it placed on the tax notices to the county by September 9th if we can, or it may. We'll be guardedly optimistic if that can happen. But we're moving forward with it. And many thanks to the citizens, the 3 member citizens who volunteered. And I know that I think the mayor and Service Safety Director Haran Mosley were there. And were you at the equalization?
Andy Stone was.
City engineer.
Okay, the city engineer, and then our Clerk of Council, Debbie Walker, and the citizens. So thanks for settling this and moving it through the process. And likewise, just as an aside, then later on this summer, potentially, we will have an assessment for Columbus-Lancaster Road, the sidewalk improvements that will be necessary there. So same kind of process. And once again, what we wanted to do is coordinate that with the other projects that we're putting together, the improvements on Columbus and Lancaster Road. So, okay. Next item is the CCA contract, and Auditor Hecht, I think, provided with us an update on where we stand with that, that it does automatically renew. Is that correct?
That's the way it's set up unless we ask to discontinue it, and they would ask that you do that in June because August is when and then in July they prepare and give information to the IRS, and August is when the IRS updates their records to download accounts that, we might want to contact.
Any other questions about that? I know that you're planning also to do like a variety of announcements and website and the second letter and listing on the utility bill. I understand we're under space restrictions on that, but we're going to check and see maybe if we can notify OU employees maybe through their human resources office so that they're aware of when people are required to be turning in income tax returns. As President says.
For all of us who get confused by all these alphabets, could the auditor remind us what CCA is and what they're doing for us?
CCA is Central Collection Agency, but it's actually the City of Cleveland. And they have contracted with other cities. It's the City of Cleveland's tax collection department. And so they've contracted with other cities like us to do this collection, just as we could offer to collect taxes for the city of Nelsonville. And then, we might want to rename ourselves instead of City of Athens. But so it's not an actual outside collection agency. It is the City of Cleveland's government employees who are doing these collections for us.
And you mentioned last week a fairly reasonable sum that they have been able to.
Right. We've already gotten $100,000 from them. We've collected another $70,000 in-house for tax returns that were due past the time they asked for them, 2011 and now some 2012s. We've collected $70,000 ourselves, and they've billed another $100,000. So the next round of letters ready to go out here in the next couple of weeks would be for 2011 returns. So it'll be a much smaller mailing and just trying to pick up people from that year.
Thank you.
So Auditor Heck, in terms of an advantage to you, you're thinking one more year to continue this, or, is that the advantage?
Yeah, I'd like to try it one more year and see how much of a difference that will make second time around, because we did 5 years this first time out, so we've captured quite a bit. Those people will be in our system and on our rolls moving forward. There's new people that move into Athens and earn income every year. I'd like to do it at least one more year. I really would.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
And of course, it's a percentage of what they bring back.
Right.
So
These are
that
people
one-
we can't capture on our own. They get a percentage. There's no additional cost to us for the next year or anything like that.
So if it's pretty lean for next year, we can make a decision on that, and that means we pay them less, or rather they gather less.
But it was what, the most it went was 5%.
5%. The most it will be is 5%.
May I ask, is there a mechanism or something that we could work with Ohio University to have in place so we don't have that same kind of issue where information wasn't shared in advance of the letters, or?
I thought Tina said that they were going to do that.
They are going to, okay.
I just recall the conversations I've had with them.
Asked the first time around, and I think now because of the reaction, they'll probably work with us this time around. If nothing else, we'll help them put something out there to all their employees, however they want to put it out there.
And as the city's largest employer, that would make sense for us to try and, get that information out and share it with people, especially with new faculty and staff members coming in with the beginning of the new school year. I know that several of the people we talked to were just, they were new faculty, they'd come from another state, they weren't aware of the situation, and that it was handled differently in the state in which they resided previously, so they weren't aware of it.
Yeah, that's another issue, as with some of the tax uniformity issues that are out there is not every state collects local income taxes like we do. So, right, people who move here from another state aren't used to that, and there are some wages that are taxable and some that aren't, and it's a complicated process.
Maybe there's something we could add to our MOU work group when we meet about next week.
That would be great. That would help.
Put it out there.
Okay. Thanks for the suggestions. Next agenda item has to do with the council chambers that we meet in every week, and some suggestions from our council team, including the people who help us every week with the cameras and making this meeting possible, and this room set up the way it is always for us, and we really appreciate that. But at this point, the chairs that we're sitting in, or that the audience members sit in when they attend the meetings, they're 25 years old. A lot of them are broken. And so some of them are ripped, and they're not really comfortable. So the proposal is to, and council members and staff have some of these details, but they'd like to purchase 60 chairs, which would be $2,550, and these would be similar to the chairs that were purchased for, the new chairs purchased for Arts West. And then replacing the projector that we permanently use, or that we currently use, and then install a permanent large format smart TV, and that would replace it. The image would be better. And it would also have independent access to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, general web browsers, and help us, I think, and other people who come to make presentations before council. The estimate for that would be $2,350. Installing a large room monitor TV, which would replace the 20-inch TV currently on the side wall by the control room, the small one over there. And that was one of the first LCD TVs installed in the city, and it shows significant window burn and shadowing from years of use. So they'd replace that with a 42 to 46-inch TV screen for easier viewing. And then desks for the administration. The large, heavy wooden trestle desks that we operate with are, you're right, a little wobbly, a little deep, a little bit foreboding when we have guests coming and make presentations. So I think the thing is, the suggestion is to use maybe some modular tables that will be a little more up to date and versatile for us in the room here. And that estimate would be $4,820 for that. And then replacing the a computer for the director of our operations here. The one that he has currently now hasn't been replaced for a number of years, and it's locking up and freezing. So they provide a lot of services for us. It's an important computer to have functioning most of the time. Any questions? Yes.
What about
Councilman
council's
Reisner.
chairs?
We can do that. You would like.
I would like.
These are they are some fairly old chairs, and when we
Yeah, I
do
think
sit in
the
them,
arms were falling off with Nancy's many years ago. Who ended up getting that one?
I did.
There you go.
to remind you of Nancy. But anyway, when we sit here for, it's every Monday night. Planning Commission uses this, Shade Tree Commission uses this. Does Board of Zoning Appeals also use this? So it's used a lot during the week. And then when we're here on Monday nights, if it's a long meeting, it can last till 9:30, 10 o'clock, so several hours in one chair.
And you have money, so it isn't a matter of seeking an additional appropriation or anything. So.
What would they cost?
I don't know. Haven't
We
been
have
asked
to
yet.
get some
Depends on
information
what
on
kind,
it.
lumbar support, it depends on what kind.
We need an
Massage chairs, yeah.
I mean, even Staples has some that provide fairly good support. We've been looking at them, and they're not horrible. They're maybe $150 or so, yes, I think.
I was going to say that our director, Scott Thompson, and Debbie Walker, the clerk of council, have been working together to gather these other prices. Maybe they could do the same for these
Thank you.
lovely things.
I'll mention one other item and just bring it up, although we don't know if it would be possible, but this is something that Scott, our director, has talked about for 20 years, is the possibility of reconfiguring this room. We've all, it can be distracting with the configuration that it is when people come in and out just by the side panel where the council members are. I think it's also, President Sands, as you were pointing out, it can be a little bit intimidating too with the raised dais and kind of behind this wall and kind of set back a long way from the audience. So what would be ideal is if we were to consider something like this, and if some of the work could be done internally, which I think Scott has talked about, the ideal time to do it would be before classes start and students come to observe when we're in fall session. So I don't know if you want to entertain additional discussion and have Scott come out and join us in that discussion and for a few minutes.
Sure.
Is Scott there? And while he's coming out, Councilmember Butler. Yes.
Thank you, and I definitely welcome the input from our staff. I might express maybe some fiscal concerns with replacing a few elements here. I definitely see the benefit of moving forward with new technology. So for me, it's an easy sell with the computers because it is such a ever-changing, ever-moving forward technology, and I know that keeping up with the times is important for getting the message out and for our technology and communicating clearly. So for me, I guess I would be hesitant to replace the chairs, my chair or the chairs in the audience. I guess I could see putting more money into the technological needs. So I might offer a little bit of scrutiny there. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Scott, can you take a few minutes to describe what you have been thinking about for the configuration of this room and ways we might think about doing it?
What we've kicked around for a number of years is moving, basically rotating this whole area to the back of the room. So when people do come and go, they're walking into the back. They're not interfering with people who are sitting here or trying to cut through and interrupting the whole meeting and everybody that's sitting here. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is just, Chris had mentioned the height and the general look and feel of the room and the space that takes up in the room is pretty. I mean, when you look at the percentage of that area to the square footage of the room, I mean, that's a huge chunk of real estate there that we think we could, in a soft U shape in the back of the room, reduce. The other thing, too, is taking and reconfiguring this, just the way it's set up. If you look at, we're taking up probably 3/4 of the square footage of the room to seat 14 people. Where if we get into a situation where we can go everybody kind of along the wall in the back, I mean, from the tables back, we could potentially increase our seating capacity, too. There's just a whole lot of reasons why I've never really liked this setup from a production standpoint, and I think, switching it around would help just the people that attend the meeting.
Have you put any of these ideas on paper, sketches or anything?
A number of times over the years we have.
Anything you want to show us?
I'd have to dig some stuff up.
I appreciate that. It sounds very interesting. I think there's a lot of good points of what you're saying. I like the idea of the traffic flow, people coming in that way.
Sure.
If worst comes to worst, we bail out that way. So.
Well, that has been brought up before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we can tell them about it all the time, but people down in Florida didn't think it was very funny.
Yeah, I mean, that's serious. That's a serious concern that, as the board, I mean, not just you, but the zoning board, we've had some very heated zoning boards over the years, and that's been expressed.
Very heated.
Expressed from the board members is you're kind of trapped up there. There's no easy way out from where you're at. So.
I just had a quick question too, Scott, about the technology and perhaps replacing the computer I think you and I have spoken in the past about the feed and how the message, I think digital and analog gets lost sometimes. Is that correct? Or the feed that gets to the viewers at home is different than what we see in here and or in your office. Is that correct?
There's about a 6 to 8 second delay. Our signal leaves here and goes clear to Columbus and gets modulated or turned into digital signal and sent back down. I've spoke to the Time Warner folks as recently as a couple weeks ago about updating our technology to basically send a raw video signal to Columbus. Right now we send a modulated signal, which is an instant reduction in quality. So that's something I'm trying to still work with, yeah.
So that's not necessarily on our end with our computer?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, our signal in-house is pretty clean.
So there's a reason why when people are flipping their channels at home, whatever is on channel 5 or this particular station looks more grainy.
Yeah, and it's, the way it's done right now is more susceptible to interference, I guess, too. So, public access, they're doing it the way I wish I could. They're sending a direct video signal to Columbus, then it's coming back. We're modulating our signal and then sending it up. So I'm not, actually when our office was on Union Street, we didn't do that. We were a direct fiber feed. We had a better signal 15 some years ago than we do now. I'm
So
working on
Scott, was any of this included in the IT report that we received? Any of your
the
issues?
broadcast stuff now.
None of the broadcast
No.
stuff?
It's all on Time Warner.
Well, if you could find some of those other plans and I don't know if you could scan the PDF and share those with
Sure.
us, and we could talk further. And I appreciate both you and Debbie Walker coordinating all of this and taking the time to research it.
Well, I'm also wondering if somebody in our buildings and engineering could you talk with them too about I think what we're needing are some totals, some ideas, you can,
As far as a design,
yeah, you can
Design
do a
costs.
stepped out kind of thing in terms of prices, which I think goes to, Councilmember Butler's concerns as well, all of our concerns. But it'd be nice to see it,
And what can we recycle? What has to be new? That sort of thing.
Any other comments, feedback? Okay, great, thank you.
thanks.
I think we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the redesign of the room, and then we're talking about
Replacing things.
Some
replacing
replacement
things.
things.
And so there's two decisions to be made, I believe.
And do you want to link the one with the other? Okay.
No. A voice from heaven up.
Okay.
We still have some infrastructure concerns with City Hall to spend money on too. We're talking about trying to repoint some of the bricks this year.
Right.
I got sidetracked when we did chimneys. I'm aware that people comment on the stairwell that's kind of tatted in terms of wallpaper. The fire escape down here, we do a bit of repair. The last time we looked at it was a chunk of change, but we did some small repairs on it.
Have the new boiler in, but, that backup generator that would serve both these buildings is pretty high priority.
So in terms of, I hear what you're saying, these are some very modest updates that we could be doing to the council chambers now that could be separate, and maybe we need to look at these other modifications in the bigger picture. Yes.
I was just going to comment that the new screens and projector should really come out of the cable fund as far as equipment for the,
Oh, yeah.
And that
and
has
it's
some,
separate funding from our franchise fees
Okay.
from Time Warner.
Okay.
So not everything would come out of the general fund.
that's my concern.
Okay,
So
okay.
you could start that, some of those
We
things.
could start that process through then, yeah. I would still, and I know that we need to look at all these different needs for the building, but, I would argue that if we've been discussing, and Scott's been discussing and looking at this from from his professional component, arena, and saying for 20 years, this has really been needing some basic improvements, that I wouldn't want to not listen to it and just look at some of the ideas and see if we can think creatively about how we might be able to get materials and, if it needs new carpet or, rather than rebuilding the dais, if we can do tables, modified tables that might only be a few $100s a piece. So I just don't want to totally, I understand you're wanting to keep it separate. I don't want to totally shut off the discussion, at least, of it.
Maybe phased in. Phased in approach.
Maybe so. Maybe that's something. All right. We have one other miscellaneous item I know from Auditor Hecht, and this is about a transfer of some cash we will be needing for the sewer, of the wastewater treatment plant improvements.
Wastewater treatment plant fund, as Laura and I were working on an updated unappropriated balance sheet. It came to our attention that although our big project is $19 million, our loan was for less than that. And we have a $600,000 difference in that money. And there was no $600,000 unappropriated in the sewer fund. As you know, for several years, any extra money that went into that fund besides the service charges were put in the sewer debt fund. And so we did recently transfer that $65,000 out to pay the loan fee. We moved $100,000 out. I think, was that for Columbus Road? Right, but we had to, but we moved $45,000 out. So there's really no money left in 220 unappropriated. And this just comes up a lot, and it's always wonderful when we get these really, good loans and grants. But our match adds up a lot more than people realize, and that's what it is. It's our match. The total project is $19,191,000. That includes the 65. The amount of our loan was $18,577,000. That's $600,000.
Now, I've got a loan amount that we had when we put it through of $19,121,027.
We got, the paper says $18,577,926.
Why would it have been?
Is it possible this is related to the design engineering, that it's allowed to be folded into the loan? Okay, I think we can get some answers on
Well,
this.
so we need to look at this. We may need to take some money from sewer debt fund, is what you're saying. That money has built up specifically for that purpose to cover our improvements.
Yeah.
So we
Design engineering?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we'll
but there's not enough money there, and so now we're looking at this 97.5 and 220. It's really not there.
220 for
So
the
we
wastewater treatment
switched
plant?
from the
No,
sewer to street.
right. Well, oh yeah, you're right, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm jumping around here, but I'm worried about the money unappropriated in both of them. We'll just leave it at that. So we're still looking at this, but we got our paperwork, and the amount of money they awarded us is $18 million.
I believe that might be related to the construction engineering that I'd like to work on.
Okay, well, and so we have this week to settle this out, knowing that, and I appreciate the forewarning that we might be needing to take some additional money from the sewer debt fund, but yeah, I would want to make sure that we all understand and get the difference between what we thought we were borrowing and the actual loan amount reconciled. Okay.
All I know is, that's what our letter says.
Okay. Well,
It's 18. So that's what we posted into the fund. However, we have ordinances appropriating the full amount, but it isn't there.
okay. Okay. And I believe that's my last miscellaneous item, unless there are other finance or personnel-related matters.
Now, we're going to move on to Planning and Development Committee, Member Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we have the AEP franchise renewal agreement. This was something that Elahu Ghazni was working on, and so since he's not here and he didn't update me, I know Paula knows a lot more about it, so.
Well, it's going to be a
describe it?
combined effort between myself, the mayor, and Councilmember Patterson, because I was at the first meeting where we discussed, the key issues were about notification when they go to do work, to notify us so that we can notify the citizens, particularly as it relates to road closures or anything. We all understand when it's a derecho, everything goes out the window, but when it's just routine maintenance work, we need to be notified. And talked about tree bank. I would like to have that language back in there. For example, we are getting a number of trees from AEP's work on Columbus Road, that they were doing those improvements. And Steve, I wasn't at the last meeting you attended, I believe, with Ron Lucas and Elahu. If you wanted to share what came out of that.
I left before the very end of the meeting. As the meeting was moving along in terms of the franchise and the components to the franchise, one of the things that was coming up from the AEP reps was one of trying to roll too many things for too long a period of time into the franchise. And when I left the meeting, it had not progressed along to where there was closure, at least in the time that I was at the meeting, in trying to settle some kind of franchise with everything that Member Gosney was asking for versus what John Buck was willing to, from AEP, was willing to concede or to reach some kind of consensus.
Well, and I believe the mayor's statement was kind of read in at that meeting regarding this whole energy
Efficiency.
proposal.
Essentially, what Elahu was talking at the time was actually having charging them for the use of the right-of-way. In other words, as a franchise, very similar to the cable system. Elahu intention, of course, was to take that money and put it into renewable services within the city. They pretty much looked at it as saying that we were asking them to tax the citizens, the customers in the city, which they were perfectly willing to do, although they kind of scratched their head why we wouldn't do it directly. And again, once you put it in that framework, I think our hands are tied. We probably can't do that. I mean, that would really be a tax on the citizens without going through a ballot system of some kind. And again, their discussion, I think they probably brought up, I wasn't at that meeting. Again, both of us weren't there. The discussion usually evolves that this would be something we could always do on the side without the franchise. The franchise agreement actually covers ourselves the ability for them to use, our rights of way. But if we want to discuss other, their question is why put it all into one, roll it all into one. From their point of view, it didn't make sense. I understand. Councilmember Gosney's point of view was that this is a possible hammer on this. In other words, we have control over that. But I think they themselves point out that, if this franchise agreement, this agreement were to lapse, they'd still be maintaining electricity. They still have to. They'd still be working our rights of ways, and I imagine it would not work well if we had to arrest them every time they started working our right of way, because the electricity would not be flowing. So they're kind of, again, what I was looking forward is a better agreement for when they do cut the trees, when they do stop the traffic, where they should let us know, better information. The tree banking I wasn't aware of. I know there was discussion of that. I didn't know if it actually occurred. And that's when they have to take out a major amount of trees. They've done it in the past, and they will replace trees if we hold them to it, and that's where we're going to put that in here. I think the only other thing I said was something about sneakers. Right?
Yeah, I wanted to put in writing that getting the shoes off the ladders. And last time we negotiated this, we did get in the ANSI tree removing, pruning standards, other than, again, if it's an emergency.
Right. I think the trees are the most contentious issue when it comes to when AEP moves in, and that's when my email just goes right off. Because not only that, they're sometimes not really nice about pruning them, sometimes they get real hacks at it. And so I think that it's important about if citizens are told ahead of time and informed about their rights and their responsibilities, I think would go towards helping solve some of that problem.
One of the difficulties, and again, we've been looking at this is a 3-year rollover, I believe, so I suspect we'll do it another 3 years, if I'm correct in that?
Yes, they would like more. I told
But,
them
25 was
probably
unreasonable.
not greater than 3 to 5.
But realize one of the things, first of all, they contract out to Aspen or Nelson or somebody like that. Two is when they talk to many times when they're talking to the property owner and they say they're going to trim the tree.
Right.
They're really not describing what their idea of trimming is versus,
Right.
you know, the homeowner's idea of trimming. So when they
Right.
cut off a whole side of a tree, that's their idea of trimming.
Right. And a lot of times I've had people complain about just the fact that they trim it and then they leave a big mess in the yard, and it's just not, they have to work with their contractors to make sure that they're doing a good enough job, because that's their public face for a lot of people, is when they come and you get that dreaded blue mark on that tree and the dot of death, so.
It's the pink ones, I think, or the orange ones.
Chris?
I absolutely agree that it would help to be clear about who has responsibility for what. Because I know where they trimmed from my place 2 years ago, I'm still sitting, they took some of the tops, but I'm literally sitting with at least a half a dozen trees that are still in the backyard. They were just left. They were cut down and
They were just left.
They were left.
They were left.
So, and that might be the standard procedure, that's what happens. But if people knew that, then, you know, knew how to better prepare for it.
That shouldn't be the standard procedure, to cut down your tree and leave it. I mean, in my backyard, if they cut down my tree, my whole backyard would be filled. I mean, that's your, that's just, I think sometimes they just get people, whoever was contracted for the cheapest amount of money, and they're not the...
Well, actually, a lot of times they leave the trunks there because they figure somebody wants the lumber. In other words, firewood. So they're thinking, oh, we're going to leave this generous wood here.
That might be.
Or, you know, the assumption is everybody's got a wood stove, I guess, but they do this.
But I mean, they should ask and
They should ask.
some kind of agreement between, I mean, it should be clean to the point of, you know, backyard clean from the day they go in to cut to the day they go away. And the homeowner should probably say if they want anything left, that's the onus of the homeowner.
Again, we're still down, it's a communication thing.
Right.
That's a procedure we've been always working with. We've been always trying to push towards that. The Deputy Service Safety Director is usually in that conversation. And they've gotten better at it because they're trying to inform people. But again, there's a wordage difference, and when they say trim a tree to them is different than...
Right.
And again, it depends on who's on that crew. In theory, they're supposed to be...
Right, it also depends on, I noticed that trimming in Dublin and Upper Arlington looks a whole lot different than down here. So I think that somehow, you know, that whether they have more people out there watching them and telling the Asplin people, you can do this, but you can't do that. But, I mean, it seems that they don't go in and just take, you know, halves of trees off, and they just seem a little more cognizant of the neighborhood.
So,
Michelle?
Member Patterson, I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit what you meant when you were talking about in terms of their contract and what they don't want in there or less of. What did you mean by that?
Well, the way the meeting went was it was essentially a lot of, some of the items that were on the table were things that they were not willing to, nor did they feel they had the actual authority to sit there and negotiate with.
The right-of-way
AEP is
stuff.
going to be going through some changes, as I understand it, and this came out of the meeting by 2015, to where you're going to have the power generation side, and then you're going to also kind of have the brokering and maintenance side of things. So that, you're going to see some changes taking place. So for them to reach out and go, we'll do a 3-year contract, was actually kind of going beyond the bounds of what they had control over, or what they could commit to, really.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because I sent an email off here recently about this whole brokering bit. We all get these letters, and I feel like we need to do a better job for the community, too. We all get these letters that say, hey, if you sign up with us, you get 25% less in your utility bills, and...
Yeah, we actually, again, Ron Lucas is looking at that. He's talking to some of the electric companies. We did, if you remember, about 5 years ago, did the gas aggregation. It was basically put on a ballot as a opt-out system.
Right.
There's been discussion within our group, our staff, of saying let's really move towards doing electrical aggregation for the city as well. It would have to go as an amendment of the previous one, and it also have to go on the ballot. So we are having that conversation. As individuals, you can always go and buy a generation, basically where you want to get your electricity generated. But
It's
the
very
idea there should be,
confusing, though.
You know, strength in numbers. So that was
Yeah.
the concept that we're talking about. I know.
We've met together with one, and Ron met today again with another company. The county's actively looking into this now, so there's some consideration about a city-county collaborative, you know, are we going to choose the same kind of supplier? Do you make it an opt-out, or do you make it an opt-in?
Right.
You know, these are some of the discussions.
Is this something our sustainability, is that group might want to look into too, that committee? I don't know. I mean, I think it's just confusing for the consumer as to what to do.
It's really just for the generation part of it. What you're seeing when Steve's talking about is the fact that they're splitting the generation from the distribution and transmission. So what you're going to have a whole different, different pieces of it. And what you're doing is you're buying the generation. And of course, that's just part of your electric bill. If you look at your electric bill, there's usually a generation fee in there. And on top of that, and which we found out with the solar panels, of course, there's also a demand charge. So there's a whole series of little charges in there. And so you would, in terms of sustainability, it's not really going to create, unless you want to say, we want to buy green energy, which is, again, Councilman Gosney brought up a couple of years ago, but the price would go up depending on how you want to buy that. In other words, if you say, I want to buy wind farms, generate electricity, what you're doing is you're buying something, halfway across the country because there's not enough here. So, and that kilowatt fee is going to go up as a result. So you may be, saving the planet but not saving the pocketbook. And the short-term, long-term, whichever way you want to do that. Again, we've been having these discussions off and on for several years now. And again, the landscape has been changed. That's why we never really acted on the gas aggregation too. Realized at this point, if we had gone into something where we fixed ourselves for 3 or 4 years, we'd probably be losing money on it because the gas prices have gone down. Natural gas prices have actually, pretty much slumped at this point. So there are things going on with it. Right now, we're just looking at the right-of-way franchise.
Right. So what's the next step that you want to, they want some kind of agreement signed?
They do, and they need time for their legal team to review it, and based on a time frame that I outlined, either way, we're looking at the suspension at some point. I don't know that we'll have the first draft that will be acceptable for you to review prior to Monday. So, but we need to pass it in July. I believe it's July 31st.
Okay.
I'd like to add, one of the other items that did come up during the discussion, I mean, we talked about the tree trimming, we talked about the trees, or the shoes, we talked about a number of different things, but one of the other was also having greener treatments for the poles, and AEP not treating any poles that are either in the wellhead protection area or from the way I understood it, really anywhere. And if they do have to treat a pole, that they put up, give 24-hour notice, so that children playing next to this pole aren't putting their hands on it or whatever, that they will flag these poles, any that they do. But kind of the upside with the not having poles treated was that knowing full well that our poles are going to need to be replaced more frequently, that wasn't something that they would tack on and just say, okay, or they're being replaced more frequently, it's going to cost you more money. It was something that they said, it's just something they have to do anyway, and therefore we wouldn't be absorbing, as I understood it, any extra cost with the tree or the pole replacement. And as new technologies come out, new greener treatments, that they would certainly use those. The conversation even went to compost or to composite poles at some point in time. And we were asking that if they do come out with composite poles, if they use those over the wellhead protection area for any transmission lines that we do have running through that area, which would be an interesting option as well.
Okay, so we will see it sooner than later. Okay. Next item on the Planning and Development Committee is the Delaware property acquisition.
I did pass out a map, and if you all remember, it might have been a year ago when Planner Ball came to see and talk about this. The family has been contacted again, and they are still interested. A year is gone. Kathy, you might have to help me out. We're discussing the whole financing. What it is that they, $25,000 money is requested from the city two of the family members, one wants to give 10 and the other one 5 for a tax, or credit for
Donation.
their taxes.
Yep.
So actually, the whole purchase price is $40,000. What I'm hearing from the auditor is that you wanted it to be cleaner that way, as opposed to the, somebody told me you said that.
That was in an email I
Okay.
got where the, one of the owner's family members had asked that there not be an exchange of checks, that they just get one check for the purchase price. So, which is fine. And then we will still get our donations. It's like when we get a grant. We pay for the full amount, but we get this money back in. We still have to appropriate the full amount of the cost, which would be the $40,000.
While receiving $15,000 in donations from the family member. This, again, is that piece that, I only have the black and white, that would connect almost to the Rotary. It does connect to the Guandi property that is already a preserve. They would like in the same kind of restrictions in terms of passive recreation. And eventually, we're going to get out there to Camp Rotan.
If possible, we
So-
hope to.
Okay. So we're going to see something detailing this on Monday?
Yes,
or-
I just reached out to the law director's office to see what he needs to provide, if anything, regarding the tax donation parts, and then go forward with meeting with the real estate attorney to
Right.
get this set. And I might have confused a few things because I was saying this summer, but my understanding is that some of those family members are from out of the country and will be in town in July and August. And I just feel like if we delay, the unappropriated resources and recreation are fairly healthy, was I was, at that time I was looking at 25.
That's what you and I talked about it the other day. But then I talked to the mayor today, and there is still money appropriated in
Right.
capital improvements.
And we
that's-
take it as a two.
Right, and that's why I add to the conservation land that we already have up there, and I think that's good, because this side of the town doesn't seem to have as much access to open lands. I mean, it's open, but it's mostly people's backyards and such, so.
They wanted it deed restricted in a manner that prohibits development except development that is related to parks and recreation use.
So we can put a zip line in.
And the park would actually be named after their
There is a big
parents.
hill.
Oh, John?
Just joking.
Evelyn.
Bill and
So,
Aveline, is that
I
right?
think
so this is 15.4 acres, and can you remind me what the Guandi property, the property on Cardiff, acreage-wise?
Can you see on your map?
Is it 2.5?
Not
This is
really.
Cardiff. I thought they only had like a 5-acre per.
Rotary.
Can't read it. Is it, can you read it on one of the color maps? Do you have a color map on there?
It says now City of Athens right next to Warden.
So that's 5 acres?
The
That's
city of
my-
Athens
Oh,
is
yeah.
5 acres,
Yeah.
is what it
So
says.
Okay, that's Guandi
This
property.
could
great-
ultimately become a 20-plus acre.
Yeah.
Connection.
The hope is it would connect to the Rotary parts too,
Camp Rotan.
Camp Rotan.
Okay.
Whichever fund we decide to pay the $25,000 out of, we'll get the $15,000 reseated back into it.
Okay. Any more questions?
We could probably
We
do
were
that at
just
5 acres.
wondering which road, the city of Athens, 5 acres, what road that is, that?
That is Coventry, is it? No.
Yeah.
Cardiff.
Cardiff.
That's
Cardiff.
Cardiff,
Cardiff.
Coventry is
Cardiff,
this
yeah.
one. So, okay, Cardiff, okay.
Okay, great. Okay, no more discussion on that? Okay. The next committee agenda item I have is a couple of housekeeping items that have been put forward by the Code Enforcement Office, looking at some language in the code. The first one is amending the Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.33, Fire Protection Systems. And basically what it's doing is changing 29.33.07 single dwelling units, Part C. This has to do with our carbon monoxide detectors, and it wants to be AC powered and input into it. So I think that something was just left out at one point. So it's requiring the carbon monoxide detectors that we passed several years ago be basically AC powered. and wired for single dwelling units. Does that make sense?
It'd be similar to the multi-dwelling.
Right. So this is in the multifamily, but this is the single unit, so it's being more specific. So you don't have just one out there in a multifamily sitting in the hallway accessing all the doors or something. No. Okay, questions?
Is there a grandfather clause for
No, I think it's...
pre-existing, or?
No, it's just, we talked about this, I think it's cleaning up the language.
Okay.
Okay, the other language change has to do with our sewer, our stormwater program, and what's being changed is in Title V, Section 5.07.06, construction activity fees, and this would be putting in the fees required to basically inspect storm water plans. Development of less than 1 acre would be a $25 permit fee. Developments of 1 but less than 5 acres would be $100. And developments of 5 or more acres the fee shall be established on a time and material basis for review costs. So that's being put in Title V. And then also in this changes, Title 23 is under Section 23.03, the sign application and permits, is a penalty, 23.03.13, Section U. Minor misdemeanors, $100 per occurrence. Each day violation constitutes a separate offense. This makes it very expensive to have signs that are not in accordance to code, if each day is a separate offense. So, any questions on that?
I would only add that I think that'll help, getting that language in the code will help in enforcement. And obeying the sign ordinance.
Well, I mean, and in most, seems that in most penalties that each day is usually considered a separate offense. So I think this is probably making it more like a lot of other parts of the code. So.
You may have mentioned this, but is this including temporary signs, or is this specific to temporary signs?
No, this is for this is to add on to the section Title 23 about signs. Okay. So if you are out of compliance with that title, you were notified that you're out of compliance, then each day they can give you a new notification. So if you have too big of a sign on a rental house, or you rent it out and it's not in compliance with taking the sign down when you need to, all the other things within that title. So.
Member Patterson, when I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals, we would occasionally give temporary signs for 1 year until maybe the business didn't know if they were going to stay there, maybe there was some changes going on or whatever, but then at that point it had to change. And sometimes I'd notice that 2 years later, 3 years later, the same sign was there. Then I knew it was supposed to be a temporary solution. And I think what happens is that businesses say, well, we haven't had the business, we don't have the money to do whatever the reason is. I mean, it somehow just goes on and on. So I guess maybe that was some of the reasons why this is being...
I think with our changes in the sign ordinance, maybe some people are being laissez-faire. So.
I think this is important, because I know I've heard from a number of city residents who have spoken about the temporary signs and some of the current legislation and the way things should read. So I think this is a good move through my lens anyway. Things like, I know there's some nuances within that. Things like balloons. You can have a balloon up 6 times a year, or some set number of times per year, 4 times a year, with a permit.
Right.
30 days at a time.
Yeah.
30 days at a time that the balloon can be up. Unless it breaks or floats away.
Now, is this considered for the rental signs that we passed a year or so ago?
It's for all signs. It's for Title 23. So it's going, if you look at Title 23, down in the penalty, it's clarifying the language in the penalty. So, okay. Questions on that one?
No.
I would just make a suggestion that when we pass that ordinance amending the code, that we put some public notice out.
This isn't really amending the code, this is amending, establishing the fees.
Right.
The fees have been established in the city code.
Okay.
But then we have a separate ordinance that establishes the fees, so that they're all in one place. And the stormwater wasn't included.
But I hear what you're saying. Do good outreach, have code put it out there, get it on the website that
Otherwise,
says it now
people are
has
going to be
this
angry.
penalty associated with
Good
it.
press coverage. But I hear what you're saying, it's already there, and,
Mayor's news conference.
okay.
Okay. I don't have anything miscellaneous.
Just want to bring up the public hearing that's occurring next week, for the CDBG funds. That'll be before the regular council meeting, I believe. Let's see, and the July 11th FEMA map, public hearing at the community center, 4 to 7.
Okay.
And just to reiterate that, I'm sure you've noticed that we're going to be doing there's going to be some gypsy moth aerial treatments from the Department of Agriculture on the south side of town. I know it's not really planning development, but I'm sure you'll hear about them.
Keep the kids inside.
I will.
Don't eat the
Believe me.
chips.
I do have one question about the FEMA. So there are new maps with the city worked with FEMA to establish the new areas, and so is that going to affect homeowners? I mean, this
the
would
east
be
side
a
it does.
very...
But did the city work on that?
It would be of interest. All I'm saying is, we have new maps, and it would be of interest for folks on the east side to attend the
East and
meeting.
Far East, but particularly the east side.
Yeah, but not as much as the original, the draft maps that came out. So there was some changes to it.
So did
and
the
it's not as
city
radical.
appeal the original draft maps?
No.
How did they
They had a
change them?
meeting and they had some discussion, the city and the university, and I believe Nelsonville was in attendance there. And then they took them back and put all their heads together and came back, and that what had been an expansion of the floodway wound up decreasing in portions in the city. It did not change in Nelsonville, which is highly restricted, and also around the Ohio University South Green campus.
And when you say they, are you talking about a state department?
They,
A
meaning
federal-
engineers that were the consultants or what have you, that were hired.
Work for FEMA.
Emergency.
And again, the floodplain did not change that much, but everybody has expectation that the FEMA insurance will go up quite a bit. They have to fill the coffers after all Hurricane Sandy and all the other environmental things happen. So the rumor is like 25% or something like that in the next couple of years. So anybody in the floodplain is going to be seeing an increase.
And I think Nelsonville is looking at significant I think that they're probably appeal.
I think their question was whether that first meeting was actually an official meeting with official
Right.
documents. And they've
They're
got
just
some
being-
questions about that, because it's taken out some of their, I think the city building is in the floodway, and
Well, yeah,
Last week.
AceNet, you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
all chunks
just
of Nelsonville.
rename the town to Floodwayville. I think they had a lot more impact than we did, so. We also have our floodplain management plan, which I think helps, so. Okay. So, any other miscellaneous for planning and development? Okay, that's all for my committee.
I'm going to move on to our Transportation Committee with its new chair, Michelle Pappy.
So last week, we went ahead and passed several ordinances related to, we did, Bounty on the Bricks, but prior to that, we had done Ohio Brew Week. Two that we kind of missed, overlooked, was the issue related to noise and to amend the vending ordinance. In terms of noise, obviously, they are going to have a band during that. I think it's just the Saturday.
It is, and it was outside the hours, but I wasn't thinking clearly, and the police chief stated that anytime it's amplified, you should have that.
You should have an
stated.
ordinance in place. So we have that ready to go for next week, and we can suspend that can discuss that a little,
2
but this
weeks.
is pretty standard fare when we have these events. The other one is the vending, peddling, and soliciting, and there's going to be a art group meeting, and then there's usually some other vendors that are around, so we just need to make sure we cover all the bases related to that. And that's, again, Saturday, June 29th, is the day that that's actually going to be happening. But vendors need to have their information to you by at least June 27th, looks like. So you have the application on file.
Right, and there's no fee for the nonprofit. So, for example, the Art Walk, that, the Passion Works, if that comes under that, I forget their name, the arts community name, they have one out there. Alpaca, thank you. You know, or whatever it is that they, you know, that they're not going to be assigned.
But for everyone else, there would be a fee, like a food vendor or...
If they wanted to be in that event area. So we already have our vendors, and if they choose to remain in their spots, they're not in the closed event area unless they want to be, and they are at a reduced rate also.
And to remember, there's a change here on the area that's going to be closed. So it was from State to Carpenter. So it's
And
the
then-
north end of Court Street.
And then you were adding
And then-
parts of East State Street by
For,
Fashion Works.
right,
Okay.
right. Any questions or comments? So we'll put those up to be suspended next week.
Yeah, emergency clause in
So what- Debbie will have it all ready.
Okay.
It's all ready.
Did it? Any other elected officials have anything
Any other
you
miscellaneous?
need to tell
I
us?
think so, yeah. We're good.
Council members? Anyone in the audience? Okay, we are calling it quits at a little bit after 9.
8:09.
Not bad.